Welcome to Health and Safety Conversations. Here's your host, Tom Bourne.
Hi, and welcome to Health and Safety Conversations. I'm your host, Tom Bourne, and with me today is Craig Gauvreau.
Gauvreau. Yeah,
Gauvreau,
close.
That's it. I got it almost right. I did practice a couple of times there, Craig. Craig, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Excellent.
Doing well.
All right, Craig, I know a little bit about you, but for those who don't, can you tell us about what you're currently doing and how you came into the industry?
Yeah, sure. I'm currently I've got my own health and safety consulting business. It's where I do like worksite safety advisor work, consulting and speaking and writing. And I've been working on my own consulting business now, I think, since 2007. And I think I'm probably like a lot of people in the safety profession, where we kind of fell into it, maybe. I got into it. I was a mountaineering instructor in the Army in my last few years. And then when I got out of the Army, just around age of 30 or so, I started working teaching high angle rescue and confined space entry. And then one thing led to another. And that's kind of how I ended up in the safety field.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Mountaineering training. What does that involve besides climbing mountains, obviously?
Yeah, it was a lot of your regular mountain climbing work and that kind of thing. But in the Army, you did a lot of rappelling, set up a lot of rope bridging, that kind of thing. And then moving troops and equipment in a mountainous environment. So
yeah, good.
Yeah, it was good.
All right. You did done some roles as a safety coordinator, superintendent, and management. You've been in safety for a while, for quite a while.
Yeah, 24 years, I think, 26 years. Yeah.
Have you seen any changes since you started?
Well, I think there's been some change in the credibility of the safety professional, since I started, from a reasonable salary to the training for safety people has gotten better, I think, for the safety people. And then I think there's been, I think the awareness is for the management and business and stuff like that. I think it's gotten, got a visitor. I think the systems and processes have gotten a little bit better as well for the businesses, right? But, having said that, though, we got a long ways to go. I think injury rates have improved. At least I'm in the construction and oil and gas industry, and we've seen in my time like lots and lots of improvement on that front. From what do you call it? In Alberta here we call it a core audit, which is a certificate of recognition. It's kind of a program started by the WCB. I think it's called Partners in Injury Reduction, and essentially your safety program gets audited and it meets a basic criteria, and then you get depending on where you're at with your industry, you can get a rebate on your WCB premiums, or of course the opposite, a surcharge. So so that kind of thing has helped. But I really believe it's more of an awareness that it's helped more than anything.
Yeah. You talk about reputation and that probably improving for safety advisors. Has it improved, or is there more skepticism about some fundamental safety principles?
Ooh, good question. I'd say there's some skepticism for sure, because the improvements are there, but they're marginal, right? We're and I look at it kind of this way. I kept in touch with my mates that stayed in the Army and went to Bosnia and Afghanistan and stuff. And Canada, we had soldiers fighting in Afghanistan for 11 years, and I think there was 158 soldiers killed in combat in 11 years combat. And I'm in Alberta, which is one of the provinces in Canada, and I think we had 160 people killed on the job last year. and that
Yeah.
hasn't changed much, right? Like that just makes no sense to me. So there's obviously I know the risk profile is different, but there's something broken there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. It's been frustrating for me because we had major change of legislation in 2011, 2012 across Australia. And that seemed to have an impact for about 6 years. We had fatality rates in workplace incidents and accidents dropping for about 6 years. But
Mhm.
since 2018, every year it's gone back up. And yeah, no one can
Mm.
explain why. And the strange thing was, some of the biggest jumps were in those 3 years we've had significant COVID, which meant a lot of people actually not working at the coalface, more working from home.
Sure.
And no one's been able to explain why.
Yeah. I wonder. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, for here, it hasn't changed much. Like nationally across Canada, when I was doing some research for my book, I went back to 2010, and in Canada, it stayed the same. Within 30 people. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's from 2010, I think there was like 950 something, and we're still at 960 or something like that across Canada. You know.
Yeah. It sort of beggars belief the amount of time and investment and educational programs we've put out there, that it stays stubbornly high at the best and goes higher at worst. That yeah, there's something that we're not seeing. That's what I'd suggest.
There is, and I think you're going to see some change. Uh, I think there's going to be a rise in it. Like when we look at the number of fatalities, like about 1/3 of them happen right on the job site.
Mhm.
At least here, it's been like this, and then about another third are workers that drive for a living,
Yes,
or
yes.
or they've been driving like for the purposes of work, and then the other third has been illnesses from occupational diseases from exposure to stuff. And I think with the baby boom group hitting retirement and getting older, we're going to see a lot of those occupational illnesses increase. So we have to be mindful of that when we look at the data, right?
Yeah. Um, Over in Australia, we've had in the last few years significant increase in the number of cases of silicosis.
Oh yeah.
Is that something that's been reflected in Canada as well?
Yep. Yeah. It's been it's it's yeah, it's up there. And then I think you're going to see benzene and stuff like that be up there as well. Exposure to benzene and the BTEX like toluene and xylene and stuff.
Yeah,
But silicosis is up there, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I still think well, I can tell you now, every mine site I've been to in
Mhm.
Australia, whether it's underground or open cut, significant dust issues, and people who suggest the only way we can keep dust down is by spraying by water trucks. They need to go out there and breathe the air in. And
Oh yeah.
I was speaking to a group of students yesterday, most of them involved in the resource industry, and they're telling me that the water trucks don't do everything. Every night they go home and they're getting black gunk out of their nose, regardless of wearing masks,
Wow.
etc. So there's obviously something we have to do better, because what I'm thinking is that it's not just going to be silicosis. It's going to be the reemergence of black lung. It's going to be
Wow. Yeah.
anything that we breathe in is going to become a significant I don't know, life-shortening event for people working in the field. And although the resource industry pays well, I don't think it pays well enough to take years off your life.
No, exactly, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the answer would lie in technology, but we gotta put the effort and the money into it, right?
that's right. That's right. All
That's
right. One of the things I like about you, Craig, is you state that you think safety should be personal. I believe that myself. Can you tell the listeners why you think that?
Well, I think there's enough rules, right? We've got reams and reams of rules. And like the OH&S code was built based off of injuries and fatalities and stuff. But I think it's in the messaging, right? Like you look at the workforce, they just want to get the work done, right? And having, I think you get to the point where you introduce enough rules and we're trying to influence people so they get home at the end of the day, whether that's through their work procedures, safe work, whatever term you want to use. But it was a game changer for me. I came to this. I was working for a company quite a few years ago, and we had lost 5 men in single vehicle accidents going out to the drilling rig work sites. And they were all single vehicle accidents. Every one of those people was tossed out of the vehicle. So obviously seatbelts were an issue. And we're having a big meeting, and one of the upper management said, well, maybe we need to have a seatbelt policy. And I thought, geez, man, these are remote work sites. If they're not going to obey the law, they're not going to obey a corporate policy from on high in the ivory tower, right? So I was out at a drilling rig, and we were talking about these 5 guys that had lost their lives, and we had this massive campaign. Like a ton of work went into this campaign, all kinds of data, your typical safety messages, graphs and stuff. But the guys at the coalface, really, it doesn't resonate with them, right? And I happened to look into the truck. We had these a 1-ton Suburban truck to take the workforce from the crew back to the camp, and I just happened to look in it, and I was kicking myself because I hadn't looked at the presentation until I got out to the job site. And I thought, oh, this is dreadful. And I look in the truck, and all the seatbelts are connected, and no one's in the truck, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, oh boy. So I tossed that in the garbage, and I went up to talk to the crew. There was about 13 of the crew there, and we were actually able to catch the night shift, the day shift, and the crew coming in on to take over from one of the other shifts. And about 11 of these guys, I got to know them a bit. They were married, they had kids, and I talked to them and said, how many of you guys wear your seatbelt in that truck? I said, no one's going to be in trouble here, because you're going to do what you're going to do when I drive down the road and the highway to the next drilling rig. So like, I said, it's all good. But I said, we talked about the 5 guys who lost their lives. Some of them were married and had kids. I said they had their lives had to move on with their wives and their kids. And I said, I thought I was going to get crucified. I said, if you guys, you're going to hit the ditch maybe one day on the way back to camp. It's an ugly winter road. I said, and it's going to be 30 below and blizzarding probably. So, if you're okay with somebody else raising your kids and sleeping with your wife, don't put your belt on. Just, they're going to have to move on. And one of the guys, he says, holy Craig, you're an asshole, he says. I said, maybe. But I said, that's reality. And he goes, actually, no, I never thought of it that way before. And I had 6 guys that day come up to me and say, I never thought of it that way before. I just thought it was a corporate rule on high, but and you have to get personal like that sometimes. Because at the end of the day, we all just want to make a living and get home and pay the mortgage and put food on the table. And it's not about rules. It's about people, right?
Yeah.
And, so that's kind of where I started that philosophy, and that's got to be 20 years ago, and it's stuck with me. And I've had my most influence on the job when you make safety personal. Make it about that worker, make life better for him or her. Like it's for them, right?
Yeah, so. Absolutely. I think if you can emphasize to your people that an injury at work doesn't stop you just doing things at work.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I always go through with my students, I go, one of the most common injuries is a lower back strain. Now, what can't you do with a lower back strain? Or when you've got a lower back strain, and it's pretty much everything, or it's painful. So we start with that and go, okay, But yeah, coming out of a truck is kind of important. I think it's something like 50% more chance of dying
Oh yeah.
than if you've got your
Or
belt on.
you're gonna be really messed up.
That's
Right.
right. Never be the
Yeah.
same again.
Yeah.
All right. What's your philosophy around safety leadership?
Oh, I always struggle with this. We often put safety as in front of a word like leadership, like safety leadership, safety culture. Leadership's leadership, and
Culture's culture. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Like, and so I think one of the things about leadership, you could call it safety leadership for if you're doing that on a marketing leadership with a safety spin or something. But I think one of the things we got to do is we've talked a lot in safety about you got to have management commitment, management support, which is a no-brainer really. You have to have that if you're going to have any sort of influence on the job from implementing programs and stuff. But I think we've been missing the frontline leader, that supervisor. And what I mean by that is missing the amount of influence they really, really weigh. Like I don't know what it's like for contractors and the guys working in the mining industry and stuff in Australia, but here in the oil and gas industry and oil and gas construction, the workforce is transient, right? They're going to be project based. They're going to work from here, start to this point, and they're finished. You're not going to influence safety culture in a 6-month period of time, let alone a year,
Yes.
or even 3 months. So, but a lot of times we'll run into these guys. They'll say, I don't know. Have you heard the phrase like workers don't quit the company, they quit their supervisor?
Absolutely.
Right. And the opposite of that is true. If their supervisor moves to another project, they often take half a dozen guys with them, right?
Yep.
They stay with that supervisor. So I think we need to spend a bunch of time teaching those guys how to lead because unfortunately what happens is we'll often take the guy who was like the best pipe fitter or the best scaffolder and because he's good at his craft, we move him up to become the supervisor. Maybe he doesn't want to be the supervisor.
True.
Maybe he just wants to do his craft and go home.
Yeah.
Right? We got to find some stuff like that out. And then we got to spend some time teaching those guys how to lead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I always think of that situation as you're moving someone who's highly competent to the point of their incompetence.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
it sounds strange. You're taking your best asset and you're putting them in the position that they have least influence or least effect on. And being the best in something doesn't mean you can lead anything.
No, just means you're highly skilled in what you do.
And yeah, you're right. It's something I firmly believe that frontline supervisors have the most impact on their groups. Whenever I talk about like safety culture to my people, I say you can have a corporate safety culture that comes from above, but it's the people in there at this particular site with this particular crew that have their own culture.
Yeah.
And if they treat safety as the first priority, everyone follows. If they know that when push comes to shove for production, safety gets pushed to the end of the queue, everyone else still follows.
Yeah. It's the old adage of whatever's important to my supervisor is going to be important to me.
That's right. That's right. And they do have the most influence over people because they're managing the people day to day. And I got to say, not training supervisors to be good leaders is a terrible, terrible mistake, or hoping that they'll figure it out.
I think it's a gap. Like I don't think it's conscious. Hey, we don't need to teach them. They're just the front line. I think it's indifference. I think a lot of people just don't think about it and how important it truly is, right?
Yeah.
I'm being benevolent there, but I think that's the case.
The only advantage I see about being the crack operator who gets promoted into a supervisor role is that they have underlying respect. That's the only thing.
Well said. Yeah, that'd be it.
But there comes a point where respect depends on competence in the role. And if you're not competent as a supervisor, very little time, people forget that you were the gun doing
Yep.
the role. And they
Yeah.
just go, well, you're not the gun anymore, are you? I mean, So, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what'll happen. They'll if they lose respect for that person as an individual, he's done.
Yeah.
It's a big job. I think the only place I think safety should be in front of a word is what your safety philosophy might be. Not safety leadership, not culture, but like what's the philosophy? And what I mean by that is, are you going to be more compliance focused? Are you going to drive rules, or are you going to be a leader and an influencer and try and get people to do things the way they should be because they want to?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Do you think both safety and supervisionary roles are primarily, I'll say, relationship-based roles?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's all it. Yeah, you're trying to get people to do a job a certain way, or follow a certain practice. They're yeah. It's just totally relationship based, right? Yeah. I really believe that you're trying to influence people in a manner that you want them to get a job done. And if the worst case scenario is that they don't respect you, you're going to get what do they call that, where it's they comply it to the letter. There's a name for it, but
work to rule.
Kinda, but it's where they comply to the letter, and all of a sudden the job takes longer and longer and longer because they're doing every single step, right? And malicious compliance, that's what it is. Right? Or the best case scenario on the other end is a leader gives these guys a job, and because he's given them the job and they respect him as a leader, they're going to go above and beyond and get things done like stellar, So it's huge, right?
Yeah. All right. How would you describe is the process that leaders, whether safety or otherwise, can get in that best position to influence the opinions and the values of the people who work with them?
Well, I think we touched on it a little bit. If they know that, like, I tell people you got to go after, whether you're a new supervisor or a new safety person, you got to go after respect and credibility. And it's a chicken and the egg thing, right? Like you don't, but they're going to go together. But if you don't have one, you're not going to have the other.
That's right.
And I think workers will cut a new supervisor a little bit of slack as he's learning to lead. But if he's if he makes a couple of mistakes or she makes a couple of mistakes, but if they know that supervisor doesn't have their back, or feel that they doesn't have their back, forget it, right? And that's where that credibility starts to come into play, right?
Yeah.
I told a supervisor a while ago, he was struggling with people, and for whatever reason he came to me to talk about it, and because a lot of turnover, people coming and going, and we had a little bit of a tough love conversation. But he said, well, I talk about all these messages and I say the right things. I said, yeah, but you can't talk your way into something you behaved your way into, right? And had to let that sink in for a little bit, and because it's what we do speaks a lot louder than what we say, right?
That's exactly right.
Right.
Exactly right. Leading by example, certainly greatly underplayed.
Yeah, I think,
and it's just living what you actually say. And
I think you have to have the courage to say, when the troops ask you a question, you have to have the courage to say, you know what, I don't know. I'm going to look into it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I found out very quickly that there are a hell of a lot of supervisors and people hire in organizations who are highly insecure about their roles. Or,
oh yeah.
whether they don't think they think they deserve to be in the role or whatever. And the way to manage that apparently is to basically be angry, be gruff, talk in high intensity sentences, and don't give people an opportunity to ask questions and that, because you don't want to be challenged on something you're not sure of.
Right.
But
And I think if you say, I don't know,
yeah,
I'm going to look into it, and actually go look into it, your respect is just going to go up and up.
yeah. So long as you actually do look into it and get back to them.
Yeah. You got to follow it up, right?
That's right.
I had this one director say to me one time, he said, how do I have more impact? I said, go out there and talk to people.
Yeah.
Ask some really good questions, and then close your mouth and listen.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny, isn't it? We get in a position where we think we know better than the people we're managing. We won't take their input on, or we'll take it on very skeptically, and then wonder why they won't talk to us anymore.
Yeah. Like, so I think some of those principles, like there's I don't know if it's really a new movement, but that high reliability organizations, where the principles behind that, where, defer to the expert. And when they say that, the expert is the person way out there on the tools.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Like there's some value in that, eh?
Yeah.
I hope that takes some traction, especially in the safety field, the HRO stuff. Yeah.
All right. You've written a book called Influence. It's going to sound like a weird question. What's the book about?
Well, it's I started to write. I don't know if you're experiencing the same things we are, but in the trades, we've got a big gap in recruiting people into the trades, and the experience levels kind of dropped over years. And I think the same thing has happened in the safety field.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people doing their best. They've taken some training either from university or workshops and stuff, and the experience level is watered down, or it has been and so I thought I started writing. I was given some talks, and people had said, you got to start writing some of this stuff down. I got thinking about it, and then so I thought I would start to write a book for safety people in the field, like just a hand guide kind of thing, not a big textbook, just a quick and dirty hand guide. And it quickly became a book on leadership, and so it morphed into a book about influence with a big safety spin. So I call it. There's my partner again. I call it. I wasn't sure about calling it influence, but that's exactly what we're trying to do. So I stuck with that, and the subtitle is Leadership and Safety at the Sharp End, or as you say, the coal face. And if when I started really looking back at it, the principles of leadership, I was taught 10 in the Army. Depending on how you word it, there's probably lots, but I looked at the principles of leadership and trying to influence people. And that's all we're trying to do. And so whatever works in leadership is going to work for safety if you're trying to influence people, or whatever works in safety is going to work in leadership when you're trying to influence the behavior, the outcome, how they do things, that kind of thing. And so that's really what the book's about. I got the 10 principles of leadership in there that I was taught when I was a young master corporal and later a sergeant, and then the 3 F's of leadership, which I was taught back then, and that's fair, firm, and friendly. So you got to be fair, which is the context is, have you set your workforce up to fail, or are you, like you might have say a crew with 4 apprentices and 3 journeymen. Well, you don't have to really watch that as close, but if you got 1 journeyman and 7 apprentices trying to get a job done, well, then you're going to tax that journeyman a little bit. So you got to be fair. Firm was about, here's my expectations, bang, 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 and you stick with that, right? Be clear with your expectations without being a tyrant. And then, of course, friendly. And this is where probably the hardest part for a lot of young supervisors or new supervisors is you can't be the friend anymore, right? You can be friendly, open door policy and all that jazz, but
Yeah.
When you take in the lead, when you jump into the leadership boots, you're not one of the troops anymore. You're leading the troops.
That's right.
And
That's right.
and that's really what the book's about. And so I've tied it through safety spin. Like I've how do you achieve or create a safety philosophy? And I took a page out of Sidney Decker's stuff about the second victim. I have a chapter on that, and that kind of goes back to that safety being personal and about the people kind of thing, and then leadership by wandering around and getting out and talking to people, right?
Yeah.
So that's it. And I'd never done anything like that before. So writing, I have a whole new respect for writers, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the other reason I wrote it is I wanted it to be a hand guide, but a lot of safety material is kind of like a lot of safety talks, and they're really boring. So I didn't want that, right?
Yeah. Writing's certainly a craft. One that escapes me, to be honest. But all right. Some basic things. I'm going to ask you a provocative question because this is. I'll tell you a story. Yesterday, I had in class. I had a project manager, and he was looking at the penalties if management didn't comply with a certain something, and it was the maximum fine was $35,000, and being in the resource industry, that's pretty much small change. And he said,
Sure.
Why should we care about safety? What is the point about caring about safety if I don't do anything, if I don't follow any of these safety rules? That's the maximum I get. I'm prepared to take that chance. I'm prepared to put everything on the line to get that extra production because that's the penalty. Why should I care?
Oh, well, why should you care? Well, that kind of skirts along the idea of the business case for safety, right? And I think back to a time when I was tasked with asking. I was brand new to this company, and so I didn't know the history. And they had introduced a hazard ID program where you identify the hazards, put in controls and stuff like that. And we looked at the work sites that had the highest number of hazard IDs compared to the ones that had the least. And of course, the incident rate, period, let alone injuries, like equipment damage, everything was lower on the ones that had the highest number of incidents. But I thought, nah, it's too simple. And sure enough, when you look at it, you go back to leadership. These guys that had the highest number of incidents, the company wanted them, or the highest number of hazard IDs reported, they had less incidents. The incidents they did have were less severe. But then when you start peeling back the onion and look at it, they had lower crew turnover. They had better customer satisfaction. They had lower repair and maintenance costs. So I think it's all together. And I think that's one of the mistakes we make is we manage safety and the safety function different than any other aspect of the business. And I think we do it wrong on that end of it. That leader should care about safety for basically two reasons. One is if I don't think somebody who says that obviously doesn't know the true cost of an incident, right? And how long the downtime, all of that stuff, because the cost of the incident goes into the corporate coffer instead of his work site. Right. And then the second part is if he's got 3 or 4 different supervisors working for him, he should be really comfortable sending his kids out to work under any one of those supervisors. Right. That's why they should care, right? Because every one of those people is someone else's kid.
I thought it's one of those things I haven't seen before, where someone actually challenge and go, well, I can make X amount of money by not doing and not caring, but here's the penalty, and it's so small compared to what the profits I could make. There's no real incentive, and I'm just like, you're missing the human element, you're missing the staff turnover, you're missing the reputational damage. You're missing a hell of a lot of the picture there.
He's only looking at this little sliver, right? And I think, so that's where I think maybe the idea of where that man's safety philosophy was purely business.
Yeah.
Right.
I call it the bean counter philosophy.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah. If I save 3 beans per day over here, by the time my time's up and I've moved on, I've saved the company 20 beans, but then they're going to have a major incident that costs them, I don't know, 5,000 beans.
Yeah.
And
I think, I wonder if that's the same, because it's project, a lot of the work we do is project based. We're given a budget.
Yep.
We got start to finish. And I know I was looking at a piece of equipment on a job site here a while ago. The site was under construction. And I knew the end users were going to have a problem with when construction was done and they're operating this part of the facility. And the construction manager said, "Hey, what are you looking at?" I said, "I'm looking at this site." I said, "The workers are going to have to wear breathing apparatus to go in there to change filters. It's awkward." I said, "We need to work at maybe changing the landing up." And he said, "Well, it's built to the drawings." I said, "Well, I know that, but it's going to be cheaper to fix it now than later when we're operating." But that wasn't in his wheelhouse. His success was start to finish, schedule, budget, cost, not looking at the
big picture,
at the bigger picture. So there's some. It's an interesting concept, but I would say the people that have that, when they say, "Well, I can make X more number of dollars by shaving a little off on safety," and I suppose that's probably right up there with normalization of deviance. We shave off and it becomes normal, and then I think that phrase was brilliant when I think the guys from NASA came up with that, right? And they shaved off a little bit and a little bit, and then all of a sudden you have a disaster. How much did that cost, right?
You talked about the short-term nature of contracts, not just with professionals, but also people involved in safety. And you talked about short-term contracts not being able to influence safety culture on a site if you're moving from site to site. I agree 100%. I just don't know a way around it, because if you're a person coming to site and you're there for 3 months, the project's going to take 3 months, and your next job or your prospects for your next job depend entirely on I don't know what you've been able to meet, the KPIs, the measurables. It's not really in your interest to rock the boat, is it? It's not really in your interest to make long-term sustainable safety gains for any organization if you're constantly moving.
Oh, true enough. And I think that's one of the things we have to recognize in the safety field when these initiatives come into play, like behavior-based safety and safety culture and some of these long-term topics or items that take a long time to influence. They typically don't work with the transient workforce, right? So then you start getting told, well, you got to have so many observation cards submitted or so many hazard IDs, and so the guys just they write it down and submit it, right? I think for project work or transient work, we got to figure out how to influence things right out the get-go, and it's not by those project or programs. They might have their place, they just don't have it in a short-term workforce. I think a short-term workforce, you can lay out, here's what I expect on a day-to-day basis, and measure things that are going to be impactful, right? Like measure how many, I don't know, it might be something as simple as how many interactions do you have with a worker? How many times do you talk to them? Right? Because it can be done. You just gotta do it actively, not one more thing I got to do, right? Like if you think of some leaders who go out, say mid management, and they go out and they talk to all the workforce, and they just do it as part of their workday because they know it's the right thing to do. And then you get other leaders who say, well, I got to fit that in. That's one more thing. Right. And they don't. So I I just think if you got the workforce out there and you go out and talk to them, just ask them, and not asking, hey, how do I help you? But
Mm.
asking like, are you getting enough tools to get the job done? And are we giving you enough time to do it? And planning and stuff, so you're not making 5 trips to the tool crib to get all your gear
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think I, I think I don't think we measure the right things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I'll tell you a story. I worked for 10 years for a well-known company over here. And at one stage, the person in charge of the operation, it must have read a safety a lead or a leadership book or something about they actually had to go and interact with the workers. And so workers are pretty observant. I've never known a worker who's not observant, but so
No,
it became apparent very quickly that every Friday at 2 p.m., he would walk around the whole plant and say hello to people, but he wouldn't give them a chance to respond or wouldn't ask them questions, meaningful questions. It was a
yeah,
forced activity, quickly move on before they can actually tell me the truth. And then I've ticked a box in thing saying I've interacted. I've gone and talked to the
right.
workers.
Check.
Yeah. And you don't fool the workers. They see it as an
No.
insincere gesture.
Yeah. I actually have it in my book about, and it's related to that, what you're exactly talking about, like leadership by wandering around. And go back and ask those leaders, what was the name of the person you spoke with?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Tell me something about the people you spoke with. Tell me about what they actually hope or what they dream or their family
right.
or what's going wrong with this piece of machinery. What could be improved? And
Yeah.
there's nothing because we're just doing a gesture, a
Yeah.
meaningless gesture.
Totally.
And I've seen some people come out recently and say, do management walkthroughs do more harm for safety morale than good? And I guess it's the way you approach it more than
Depends on
anything.
how you do it.
Yeah.
I was one of the jobs I was on. I got to know one of the. He was an iron worker, I think, and usually he was up on the. He was a good trainer. Like he would take an apprentice and say, "Here, come with me," and really good at it. And then I hadn't been on the job that long, but he was clearly I wouldn't say upset, but he was on the ground. Usually he was up with the crew and he was doing some stuff on the ground. I just asked him what's up, and turns out his wife's sister was in 4-stage cancer, probably not going to make it. He wanted to be there with his wife, and but he had to be here to pay the rent, make the mortgage, and so well, let's talk to your supervisor and we'll figure something out. My supervisor doesn't even know my name, he says, or a superintendent was a manager. And then he had a few other choice words, but that indifference, like and I went up, I thought, geez, really? So I went up and talked to this was a contractor, like a subcontractor that I was working for the prime contractor. And I went up and I said, that fella down there at that one job site that has his sister-in-law is real sick. Who? He says. I thought, man, you only got 30 some people to worry about. But that indifference and the guy's a good guy, the superintendent. He just never thought about it. And
Yeah.
and unfortunately he came off the perspective of him towards the workforce was really bad. And it got to the point, well, I don't know if it was toxic. I don't think we had time to get there, but tell me that guy down on the ground's head's in the game when he's worried about his wife and his sister-in-law.
No, it's just not.
Yeah.
All right. Some quick questions because we're
Sure.
getting close to time. Stiffer and stiffer penalties. We seem to be moving to a regulatory environment where we just throw more and more bigger and bigger penalties on people. Do you think they work?
No. There's some merit in the right setting, I suppose. But like in Canada, we got a thing called, it started years ago, called Bill C-45, where you could management and supervisors could be held criminally liable.
Yeah.
And of course, now you're talking a criminal record and all that kind of thing. And again, no teeth whatsoever, right? The fines that have happened from the Safety Act and stuff are way up in the six figures for some companies, but I think the outcome isn't there. It's not happening, right?
Yeah.
I think the motivation behind it is probably sound, but I think when you have poor management, you're going to have some companies who have bad management, you know, where they don't care about the workforce. They're just there to make money and move on. But the vast majority of them are just generally good people, and they're not. I don't know. They're not out to hurt people on the job, you know.
Yeah.
Some are so far disconnected and removed, but I think the fines should be in place if the management systems aren't there, you know, if they're total disregard, because there is some of those cases, but I don't think that's the norm.
Yeah.
And clearly, you know, like in Canada, we've had fatalities numbers stay the same all the way across for 15 years. You know, I don't think it's changing.
Yeah.
I do think like the surcharges and stuff that we have in the WCB premiums, it gets management's attention, you know, from a bean counter perspective, but I don't know. Again, I think it goes back to what are we measuring, right?
I think the bigger penalties make politicians feel better at night. They get their 5 minutes of fame. So and so is being prosecuted for X, Y, Z. But I never see business owners or leaders at the front line change their decisions on a day-to-day operational basis purely because, oh my God, there's this new legislation in X, Y, Z. It just doesn't happen.
No.
And so you're left with a few people being the scapegoat.
Yeah.
And nothing changes.
And nothing changes. And there's been a few pilot programs and stuff going on years ago here where the WCB, workers' compensation, was tracking the names of different supervisors. And I don't know what ever came of it, but I don't know if you guys have heard there, but we got a big oil company here in Canada where their safety record was so bad that the shareholders got involved and the CEO had to step down.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to get some mileage out of that.
Oh yeah.
More than you will fines.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Safety slogans. You've been in safety long enough to see plenty of them. What's your favorite safety slogan?
Oh gosh. Which one?
Yeah. Which is
I would you know what? There's probably a tie between zero harm and safety is our number one priority.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
No one believes them. Completely unachievable.
Yeah.
And have negative impacts on reporting. It's well done.
Yeah, like if you just paid attention to the audience, like if the people spouting that stuff, just paid a little bit of attention to the audience when they say you're our number one priority, they would realize that all the audience is just switched off. Anything that manager said before, even if it was right on the spot, is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all family.
Oh yeah, that one, right? Yeah. Yeah.
You're our champions, our heroes, etc., etc. Yeah.
Yeah.
The things that people never believe in. Speaking about things people don't believe in, or have cynicism regarding, pre-starts, checklists, take fives. What's your opinion of them?
Well, things like take fives, take two for safety. What's the other one I heard recently? It was 20 or something like that. Every 20 minutes, take 20 seconds, look 20 feet around, or something like that. It's just, yeah. I don't know. I struggle with some of that stuff. It's like, stop saying that stuff.
Well,
Right.
well-intentioned
Yeah.
nonsense, I'd suggest.
I really believe people that come up with that, they're well-intentioned, but they've
Mm,
never been on the tools. People that come up with that stuff
They're
either
PR
forgot what
people.
it was. Yeah. It was, yeah. Excuse me. They either forgot what it was like on the tools, or they just, yeah.
I'd
You
love to
know,
see people who think these things up to actually come and spend a week with people who are working in the front line, because
yeah.
then they'd see how serious they take those slogans and what
Yeah.
effect hearing those
I know.
slogans actually does for these people.
I know. I got cross-threaded with a previous boss I had who I think he was a good manager coming up with systems and stuff like that. Not the best leader at all, but anyway, a good manager for sure in his own right. But excuse me, in the department where they were coming up with some sort of program on paper sounded good, and I asked the question in the meeting when they were presenting it: how is this going to impact the end user? You know, the job site's 900 kilometers from here. That worker's got all these other things he's got to do. He's got to do the I think what you're calling a pre-startup checklist is what we call an FLHA, or a field level hazard assessment, or something like that.
Job
And
hazard analysis over here, for
yeah,
example.
yes, yeah, whatever 3 or 4 letters you want to throw at it.
Yeah.
Um, and I said, well, they'll just have to do it. I said, but it needs to add value to his job site or her project. Like it needs to mean something to those people out on the tools, and just disconnected.
Yeah.
Right? It
Yeah.
was too bad.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I don't know. I struggle with some of that stuff.
Yeah, me too.
There's
Me too.
but checklists and stuff, like, they have their place for sure. Even the JSAs and hazard assessments. But again, it's in the execution and how they're done right.
Yeah.
Like there's a really good book. It's called the Checklist Manifesto by a guy named Atul Gawande, and he was trying to reduce the number of in accidents in surgery in the hospitals. And he was a surgeon. It's a brilliant book, and he talks about the different types of checklists and stuff. And he stumbled onto some of the checklists from construction, and then leaned on the aviation industry quite a bit. Because there is a checklist, like a pilot going through his pre-startup. But certainly, I think we're missing the bar on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like you'll see a startup checklist, or what we call an FLHA, and the hazard is driving to work. I said, why do you have that there? Well, it's a hazard. Yeah, but you're already at work. Right?
Oh dear. Yep. Missing the point.
Yeah.
All right, Craig. I'd love to stop and talk all day, but unfortunately, that's pretty much the end of our time.
Yeah, we've used up an hour real fast.
Yeah. Been an absolute pleasure, and thank you again for coming on. But for now, that's it, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Thanks for listening to Health and Safety Conversations with Tom Bourne. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week.